let's go ahead and get going, and we'll let everyone come in as they can. Thank you guys so much for joining and supporting us. We're so excited to have Shannon here. So thank you so much for your time, Shannon. We're excited to learn from her. I am going to monitor the chat in the call. So if anything comes up during the call, any technical difficulty or anything, pop it in there. I'll reach back out to you. We're excited to hear from Shannon for about an hour on some instruction, and then the last 30 minutes will be kind of a Q&A. So if you're a member of Stock Course Ireland, that's something you can participate in. Otherwise, feel free to hang around and listen in on that. But if you're not a member already, I will drop the link in the chat in a couple minutes, and feel free to hop on there so that you can support some more of these kind of webinars and e-shows and upcoming events as we're growing this community in Ireland and Northern Ireland. That being said, I'll quickly just bring notice to, we have Krista, Anne-Marie, and Sorsha on here. They are on our board. Krista's our director at Stock Course Ireland, and I am Maddie, also a board member. So we're so thrilled to have this going, and we'll give some time over to Shannon now. I'll go ahead and share your slides, and we'll let you take it away.
Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Shannon Watters. I train quarter horses and paints in Whitesboro, Texas. And I've always been really passionate about showmanship. I've trained, quarter horses and paints in all the all-around events, from pleasure to hunt seat, showmanship, horsemanship, act, Western riding trail. But as a youth, I was really into showmanship. I won the Quarter Horse Congress. Did a bunch of, national titles and things like that. I feel like it's a class that anyone can be good at if you work hard enough. And no matter what horse you have, this is a class that anyone can be really good at. And it's such a strong connection class between you and your horse. So it's just a great way to connect to your horse. And, you can just improve and improve and improve. And, I think it's really fun, really different. So as we get going today, we're going to talk a little bit first about the class purpose, then some rules about equipment and attire, just kind of the physical things. We've got some videos to look over. We'll talk a little bit about posture and positioning, a little bit about some of the penalties that are common to see. A little bit about refining your setup, what's correct and how to make it better. And also some maneuvers, just kind of take a look at the common maneuvers and go from there. So first off, the purpose of showmanship is the connection between the exhibitor and the horse. It is not a halter class. Although it is very important that your horse is groomed and fit and all of that. But it is not judged on the conformation of the horse. It's judged on the exhibitor's ability to fit and show a horse at halter, evaluate your ability to execute with your horse, set of maneuvers prescribed by the judge for the pattern with precision and smoothness while exhibiting poise and confidence and maintaining a balanced, functional, and fundamentally correct body position. So that's all of the things that we're going to touch on a little bit later. But like I said, the main purpose of the class is just seeing that communication and connection between you and your horse and how you can put a pattern out there and, really execute it to the best of your ability. So for showmanship equipment, it calls for suitable Western attire is the way that the rule book reads. So it's going to be, there's a few options there. You're going to have your pants, slacks, trousers, or jeans. And then you can wear a shirt, a blouse, showmanship jacket. It has to have long sleeves and a collar. As the pictures show, you can either do a suit type of situation. It's a little bit simpler. Or, of course, we've all seen the blingy showmanship jackets that are out there and the custom jackets, but you don't have to have that. You have to have a Western hat, cowboy boots, and So it dictates that the hat must be on the exhibitor's head when the exhibitor enters the arena. So somehow somebody must have gotten into the arena without their hat, but to make that rule. But I think that goes without saying. You have to take your spurs off, no chinks or chops. So the trousers and boots, as we're going into that, we'll talk about the pants. I think, as the picture shows, the pants need to be long enough. They need to, go down, cover your heel, obviously not be dragging in the dirt, but you do need to make them long enough so that when you walk and jog and do your maneuvers with your horse, that they keep covering your boot. So all of these examples are really good. The picture that you see in the middle, someone is taping their boots. What that is for is it actually makes it a little bit easier to run in your boots because there's a little bit more stabilized. And also it makes your pant fall down over your boot a little bit better, makes your line cleaner. So they do actually make straps for that, or a lot of us just use tape. So that's what that photo is demonstrating. But then also, the pants just can be very simple. It's okay. Go ahead. For the top and the hat, as shown here, there's like a suit jacket, more of a suit type. And then also your, blingy crystalled, traditional showmanship jacket. Either of those are acceptable. The main thing is that it fits well and is flattering on you. And even if you don't have a suit jacket, if you have a well-fitting blouse, with nice pants and a belt, that is legal to show in showmanship. And you will see for the girls that it is, mostly you're going to see a jacket situation. And then the Western hat, again, the main thing is fit, shape, make sure it's clean. That's all easy stuff that you can take care of to just improve your overall presentation. Go to the next one. For the halter and lead, as it says, like the show halter should fit snugly, so you want to tighten it up. So like the picture shows, it fits nice up under the jaw, comes up on the nose, and then the throat latch, like there shouldn't be a lot of slack. It shouldn't be loose and, shaking around. And then, no, okay, there's a good YouTube video here. Sorry about that. I was just gonna say, you don't have to have a silver show halter either. Like a very nice, clean leather halter that fits appropriately is acceptable as well. We're gonna start a YouTube video here on like a halter and lead. And this is more a little bit from a halter perspective, but it applies to showmanship. I don't think we're gonna watch this whole video, but it's easily found on YouTube. It's a lot of really nice information. So Maddie, if you wanna start the video, we'll run through a little bit.
So many times I see a person that has a show halter on the horse and it's hanging down on the horse's face and it doesn't fit the horse's face properly. You can make a really pretty headed horse look ugly if you hang the halter down on their face. So it's very important that you fit the halter on the horse properly, as well as not only halter, but as showmanship also. The overall picture makes a big difference. So several things. You got to take in consideration the age of your horse. If you're showing a baby or a yearling, you got to use that type of age halter for them. You can't put a aged halter on a yearling or a yearling halter on a weanling. So you got to start out with trying to properly fit it with the age of your horse. Currently, this horse that I'll demonstrate on is a yearling, and he's kind of in the middle. It's hard to fit a yearling halter on him, but he's not big enough to fit a horse halter yet. So sometimes they're kind of in the middle there. But you want it to fit snug up tight. So many times you can see this horse, the halter actually is hanging down on his face, and I'll loosen it a little more, and you'll see what I mean where the halter's hanging way down, loose on his face. That's a very poorly fit halter. You got to make sure that the nose band is correct, that it sets just below the eyes. You want the side cheek to be the proper length. If you have one that's really long, it's not going to fit. You want to make sure that the jaw piece underneath has a wire in there that you can bend it and form around the jaw. Then the brow band, the crown piece. You want to make sure that that halter is fit up tight, snug to that horse. You can see the difference, how much difference right there that looks when you fit the horse halter up tight, and it forms up behind his jaw and it sets up really nice and neat. There's several ways that you can apply the chain to the horse's halter. Right here, I have it under the chin, and it goes under the chin through the loop, and it hooks up on the other side. As well as you can take it over their nose and through the loop and snap it again. A lot of showmanship people or halter, they'll just take it through the ring at the bottom of the halter underneath their chin and loop it through there and snap it back to your lead shank. You want to make sure you
Maddie,
have
I think we can probably
a
pause
good
there.
length chain as well. That's very important.
I'm just going to pause because I'm going to talk a little bit about the lead that's going to be a little different than what he has to say. Mostly what you're going to see in showmanship, you are going to put the chain under the chin. And you don't have to have a chain. You can just have a snap. You can also have a leather strap to use instead of the chain, depending on your horse. But what he's showing, and the way they show him in the halter class a lot, he has a lot of chain there. And I just kind of wanted to point out, mostly for showmanship, you want a smaller length of chain out of your ring. It's just going to give you a little bit more control and less movement. And you can just find a connection with your horse a little bit easier. So when you adjust your chain, you want to go through the ring, under the chin, and then back up on the side if your chain is long enough. And then sometimes you might have to double that to make sure you have an appropriate length. Probably 4 to 6 inches of chain coming off of the left side of that left ring is really what you're mostly going to see. And, of course, every horse is different, so there's always exceptions. So that's just mostly what you're going to see because it does give the best connection for you. And it just alleviates a little distraction and a little bit of extra movement, makes things look a little bit more seamless. So, but also I would highly suggest, these are easily found on YouTube. So if you want to listen to the rest of what he has to say, watch this again, listen to him again, definitely, use that resource. And if you have questions about it, it's easily found on YouTube as well. Okay, we can move on.
So many.
We're going to start a video here. These are some really high level patterns at the AQHA World Show. I can kind of talk through and show you what's really outstanding about these. There's just a lot of style, a lot of precision that you're going to see here. We can talk a little bit about what makes these maneuvers great. And again, lots of patterns out there on YouTube for you to watch. I'll just kind of talk through her maneuvers here on these couple patterns, and we'll go from there. So we can go ahead and start this one. This one, they do start videoing while she's preparing herself at the cone. You can see that she takes her time with this setup. Your setup at the cone is super important because it's the judge's first impression. So she's kind of taking a little bit of extra time to make sure her horse is very square and very straight. So that first impression when they first look up at her is really, really impressive. You can see the horse trots forward with her very willingly. They are kind of in a good rhythm together, and they're going to do another brief setup here. And she does this one a little bit quicker because this does call for setup, pause, and then move into her back. You're going to back a curve here. You can see this horse moves back very nicely and very willingly with her. Again, it's the connection. That horse is connected to her, is following her movements. And she's going to walk forward here. You notice her body is really square, really straight, very connected to her horse. She's going to move into this turn. If you watch the horse's body, it's very straight, finishes straight. She's going to trot up here. And if you watch their horse's legs and her legs are in a pretty similar rhythm. So that's really something. It's hard to attain, but it looks really good when you get there. So she trotted her circle, trotted back up to the judge. She puts her horse to the judge, not herself. So that horse is going to be straight in front of the judge. She's not lined up with the person to the judge. You want to put those horses' feet at the judge's feet. Again, very nice quarters here. She's very precise. Going to move into another turn. Again, the horse stays very straight, very connected to her. She'll move right into that back after, she did move quickly from the turn into the back, but she was very straight and allowed her horse to finish. And she's going to trot out very nicely there. Very good stop. That's obviously a world champion pattern. So those are all things, to try to aim for with you and your horse. I think we've got one more. Again, first impression, horse is square. Horse is very well groomed, very shiny, very fit. Again, she's very efficient here. And look at how they're walking together. That's really, really cool when that can happen. And she's going to do this brief setup. Move straight into a trot, corner. I think that's an extension there. If you notice, again, her horse and her are very connected, very much in the same rhythm. Nice straight stop. And she kind of allowed that horse to balance for a second before moving into the turn, which is really important. Stops nice and square to move into her back. Again, backs super willingly, stays out of her space, but stays connected to her at the same time. Again, as you notice, she kind of allowed her horse to balance before she moved into the turn. And that's just going to increase your odds of having a more correct turn, is balancing between these maneuvers. Like, you're watching these, and these girls are very efficient and very connected. It's a very high level of difficulty. I like putting a little bit more punctuation in between as you and your horse are learning. And if you watch the quarters, her footwork is super efficient, very precise. She's got her horse lined up exactly to the judge. And watch her balance between everything. Very good. Everything was very willing and very connected. That's obviously a super high sort of pattern to strive for. So watch a lot of those and watch the little details. It's really cool. Okay. So now that we've watched those, we can talk a little bit about position. Obviously, you're going to be on the horse's left side. So your right hand will be next to your horse. And then you're going to be on the leather. As you see this top picture, she's right there next to the chain, but you can't be on the chain. You have to be on the leather. And then the remainder of your shank will usually be held in a loop in your left hand. Everything happens from the left side of the horse. And then it is a huge thing that you should never stand directly in front of your horse in any sort of your maneuvers, especially that's what you see a lot in backing. And that is a huge penalty, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So, definitely as you practice your backing and you think about your backing, make sure that you stay to the left side of your horse in all your maneuvers. There's different ways that you can hold the end of your shank. Most people just do one loop, but depending on your shank, it's just you want to have it nice and neat, as shown in these pictures. It's just nice and neat. Usually one loop. If you have a longer thing, it's okay to do two loops, but you have to keep it the same throughout your whole pattern. So position and walk and trot. This is just shows like you're going to be, you want your horse to be kind of right beside your right hand. And then that puts you kind of at their throat latch or a little bit farther back. You don't ever want to be in front of your horse, or dragging your horse behind you. And you also don't want your horse too far ahead of you. So in these pictures, she's at appropriate space and she's in a good position where she can do all of her maneuvers. If she needs to do circles and needs to do corners, she can pretty much stay right there. If you notice that horse's, face is right next to her right hand. So that is a proper position for your walk and trot. And position in the back. This is nice. We've got a few different things here. In your first picture, you know, she's right there off to the side of her horse. In the second one, she's kind of like in the horse's space. It's not really ideal. You kind of want to stay out in front of your horse and to the side. And I think this third slide, it shows that she's too far in front of her horse. It's kind of hard to tell from there. But that is one thing you want to look out for. I don't like the second slide that she is in this horse's face and looks like she's dragging him back. I like the position of the first slide the best, where you're just going to back your horse out of your personal space. And then, like I said, I think this third picture, she's standing directly in front of her horse trying to back it, which is a big penalty and incorrect and unsafe for that matter. So can move on. In turns, okay, your first picture here is correct. You see the horse is stepping across. He's stepping his left front foot over his right front as he's turning and then pivoting on the right hind. She's giving him space, you know, and he's right there with her right hand. And then in the second picture, you can see the horse is crossing behind. So that is not good, and it'd be extremely difficult to hold a pivot if they would cross behind. So, and she's also kind of in front of her horse. She's in her horse's space, and, you know, definitely looking down. So, you know, make sure that your turns are very precise as you teach your horse and you learn. Those horses are crossing in front, left foot over the right foot, and then, you know, pivoting around that right hind. And so even though you're pivoting on your right hind, make sure your left hind is stepping around in front as well. So those two examples. And then you can, when you get out of position, like the second one, you're going to find yourself leading into some penalties too. So that will come up in a second. Next. As I said, common penalties. So as your pattern is drawn, you want to replicate that pattern, you know, plan it out in the arena. And so break of gait, walk or trot up to 2 strides is 3-point penalty. So if you're walking and they trot a stride, you're going to get a penalty. Or if you're trotting and they walk beside you for a stride, you're going to get a penalty. Over and under turn up to an 1/8. So that's about like, if you're at a 90 degree and you take 1 step over, you're gonna grab a penalty for that. If you tick or hit the cone, 3-point penalty. Sliding a pivot foot. So that is like not necessarily coming completely out of position, but just not being able to hold that foot and having to slide it to maintain the balance is going to be 3-point. Lifting a pivot foot during a pivot and putting it back in the same place, also 3-point. Again, doesn't necessarily mean you're completely out of position, but they've got to hold that right hind foot. And then lifting a foot and replacing it in the same place after presentation. So when you go to your inspection and set your horse up, when you acknowledge the judge that you have finished that setup, if your horse takes another step, if they kick out a fly, if, you know, anything where they move a set after you have acknowledged that you've finished your setup, that's a 3-point penalty for lifting it and putting it in the same place. So, you know, it's very important that your horse understands when that setup is complete, and it's very important that they hold those feet the whole time. As far as your 5 points, first one, not performing the gait maneuver or stopping within 10 feet of the designated area. So that's why it's really important that you kind of map your pattern in the arena, have a plan. You know, it's all about your plan. What's your plan here and your plan here? What are you going to look for? You know, find points in your arena to look for so that you know you can execute the pattern as drawn. Break of gait, a walk or trot for more than 2 strides. So again, if they trot while you're supposed to be walking for more than 2 strides, or walk when you're supposed to be trotting for more than 2 strides, that bumps it up to a 5-point penalty. Splitting the cone. So if you have a situation where you maybe have to do a pivot at a cone, or go to the cone, and for whatever reason that cone gets between you and the horse, again, 5-point penalty. And that all comes down to planning your pattern as well. Horse stepping out of setup after presentation. So this is, instead of lifting a foot and putting it back in the same spot, they've actually stepped out of that setup, becomes a 5-point rather than a 3-point. And then stepping out or moving the hind end significantly during a pivot or turn. So this is, instead of just lifting a pivot foot or a small slide of the pivot foot, this is like an actual step out with that pivot foot, is the difference between 3 and 5 points there. Under overturning from an 1/8 to a 1/2 of a turn is 5-point penalty. Of course, if you get out by a 1/2 a turn, you're going to really be messed up in the rest of your pattern. But again, that's the range that bumps it to a 5-point. If your horse ever rests a foot in your setup, that's a big 5-pointer. And definitely that's something to work on as you practice and make sure that your horse understands that that's not okay. And it's also really important while you're set up, at the cone and during your inspection, that you're always just kind of making sure that your horse hasn't, rested a foot or moved a foot. And so it's important to pay attention to your horse all the time during the setup. Okay, next. 10 points. Not in the required position during inspection. So during inspection, with the quarter method, as the judge moves around your horse, if you miss one of your crossovers or, don't cross over at all or get really late, that becomes a 10-point penalty. So again, that's a really important thing. That is a silly penalty to get, because that is really, really easy. It's something you can practice a lot. So, if you're practicing that, it should become like muscle memory. And, that should be a penalty. That's an easy penalty to avoid. Touching the horse, kicking, pointing their feet at the horse during the setup. Again, that's an easy one to avoid. We just know we can't do it. If you have a super green horse, I mean, you should be able to, move its feet. If not, you're going to get that penalty. Standing directly in front of the horse, like we talked about with the backing, or, you never want to be directly in front of the horse. You always want to, just from a safety perspective, be a little bit off to the side. Loss of lead shank, holding chain, or 2 hands on shank. So, loss of lead shank is, if you drop the tail of your shank or you let go of, your right hand. If your hand gets up on the chain off of the leather, and then, if you grab the right side of the chain with both hands, that's a 10-point penalty. Severe disobediences, biting, pawing, rearing, kicking out, or continuously circling the exhibitor. Of course, all of these are going to inhibit your ability to perform the pattern, but it also is a 10-point penalty per instance. And then as far as the pivot, if they step out or move the hind end significantly during a pivot or turn, that means if they really walk a circle and don't make, there's really not a big effort to even hold the pivot foot, is what's going to turn that into a 10-point. And then your DQs, if you lose your horse, you don't get a score. Correct number, willful abuse, excessive schooling, use of artificial aids. You can't go in with a whip, unfortunately. That would be nice sometimes. Illegal equipment, loss of control, severe disobedience that endangers the exhibitors of others, knocking over the cone, going off pattern, never performing the specific gait. So that means if there's a walk and then a trot in your pattern, and then, going to the judge and you walk the whole way to the judge. So that would be a DQ because you never did that. You never did that gait. So over or under turning, I think that's supposed to be 180, more than 180 of a turn of the designated turn. So more than a half turn over or under. And then lameness. If they decide that your horse is not sound, you may also be disqualified. I mean, really the disqualifications, Most of those are very, very easily avoided. And the 10-point penalties as well. Those are very easily avoided with, proper planning and, just having a plan and knowing how to prepare your horse. So we can move forward. So I want to show this video. This is actually a really nice pattern, a good exhibitor. And let's see. I just want to show you, this is just it's got a penalty in here. So let's decide which kind of penalty this is going to be. So she's going to start at a trot here. Trot all the way to the judge. It's a good stop here. This is nice. The judge is walking slow. You can kind of watch her quarters as she comes around. Okay. Maddie, is it possible to back that up quickly to right at the end of her setup? Okay, that's good. So really nice smooth pattern here, but I want you to watch really closely as she goes into her pivot. Let's watch this right hind leg. Okay. So right there, I would call that one a 3-point because she just kind of adjusted that foot. She kind of picked it up and put it back in the same spot. She never lost her body position. So just, that one could kind of sneak away from you, but that would be an example of a 3-point step out of the pivot. So just kind of wanted to provide you, very nice pattern, very good exhibitor. The horse stayed in position the whole time, but did have a slide that resulted in a penalty. Okay, we can go to the next video. Okay, same horse and exhibitor. It was the only videos I could find. Here we see the suit, actually, which also looks really good and really tailored. Let's see if we can find the penalty in this one. There's a lot going on in this pattern, actually. But if you can see, like, you can watch this horse and handler have a really good connection. They stay in a really nice position together. Okay, so lots going on in that pattern, very complicated pattern. Maddie, will you back it up to right before the setup for me, please? That's good. It's a big turn. So if you can see right there, she took the setup and her horse moved. And it's really, really, that one's a hard one to catch. So like she goes there. Oh, sorry. She looks at the judge and then the horse moves. See that? So I would call that, and then it actually moved a front foot too. I can't remember if they gave her 2 penalties for that one, but definitely 1 5-point there. So we had to watch this one a couple times, but she definitely looked at the judge. So, you know, you just like right there, you have to make sure in that setup that your horse understands that whoa means whoa, and when you're out, the feet don't move. So that was a great pattern with a lot involved, and then she took a big penalty for that. So I just kind of wanted to see like some nice patterns where things do go wrong. And that's something we can talk about in the Q&A as well. But some of them are hard to catch. But that is what happened there. So what do we have next, Maddie? Just a little bit more talk about the setups. Again, like based on your horse's conformation, you want them as square as possible underneath themselves. Again, both of these pictures, nice representation. You know, so this is a lot of time working with your horse, getting them to make small moves. I really recommend coming up with a system for your setup as you're working with your horse so that every setup your horse knows what to expect. Choose what foot you're going to, you know, are you going to move your front feet first, your back feet first? The way we do it in my barn, we always move the left hind. So your first move is going to be your left hind, forward or back, depending on how they're stopped. You set the hind feet, stop that, then set your front feet. So that's kind of our system. Everybody can do it a little bit differently, but have a system so that your horse learns some consistency there. And I think is there a video next? Yeah, there is a YouTube video here that's got some nice, of course, all the videos that we've watched so far, the horses are very broke. And I think this has got a little bit greener horses, maybe to show you how to teach them. So we can start this, Maddie. And
do you want me to put some audio on this as well, or do you want to talk through it?
Why don't you go ahead and put his audio on, and then we can
Perfect.
talk about it a little after.
Great.
Hi, I'm AQHA professional horseman and team wrangler member Rob Maneely, and today we're going to talk about setting your horse up for showmanship. This is Kara and Mikey, and they're going to help us today with setting your horse up for showmanship. Now, when you're setting your horse up, you want to be angled more towards your horse with your feet together. You're always going to want to set the hind feet up first and then get the front feet square. Ideally, you want to keep your hands with your elbows in, and you want to don't break your wrists. You want to be positioned where you're between the horse's eye and their muzzle, and you should be angled toward their right front foot. That's a perfect position. And then you never want to be right in front of your horse because this is the danger zone. And make sure that that horse is set up where there's a straight line from his hip down through his hock, that they're not ever with their hocks out behind them. And you want their front leg to comes straight down off their shoulder. You never want to get your hands up too high, or you never want to carry them too low. You never want to have this coil too tight around your left hand. You want to keep this coil loose, and it should be a longer length lead shank. It shouldn't be real short. And then the distance between the halter and your right hand, that's just preference. Just so you keep that angle towards your horse with your head up, so you look confident. And the more you bring your hands in closer together, the more you pinch your shoulders, the farther out you have your hands, it'll open up your chest and your shoulders. Just push him back once and reset. You always want to make sure that their legs are up underneath their body, that they're not too stretched out, or they're standing way up underneath themselves like an elephant on a box. So those back legs, you always want to set the hind first. And the biggest thing in showmanship is to have that perfect setup. And if it takes a little more time, then you need to set your horse up, not just go for what you get. It's not a timed event, but the degree of difficulty in it is setting your horse up in a fast manner. So like there, the hind feet aren't very square, so we're gonna move that left hind back. She's got the front pretty good. You can bring your horse forward, or you can bring him back for that setup. And it's something you need to work on every day. You need to take your horse out and set him up like 20, 30 times a day in order to get that horse setting up, and use different environments, like set him up in the barn aisle one day, set him up in different arenas, or set him up when you're walking him out to go to the pasture. It's all, that's practice makes perfect in showmanship.
Team Wrangler is a program sponsored.
Okay, that was all really good information. Again, you can go find that on YouTube. So it was nice to see she had a little greener horse than the horses that we were watching before. But he's right, like practice those setups every day and in different environments. Practice it when no one's in the arena. Practice it when the arena is super busy. So your horse just gets in the habit. Like I said, consistency is the hugest key for working on those setups, and having a system for your horse knows how to move each foot. And what I like to talk about is being deliberate in your setup. Like, I don't like someone to come to me and set up and just move feet until they're kind of square. I like to see the plan. And so that's why I said, have a system. Like when you evaluate how your horse is stopped before you go to set them up, have a plan. Okay, so the way my horse is stopped, I need to move this hind foot here and then this front foot here to have the best setup, and execute that plan. The judges can tell the difference between whether you luck into a setup or whether you have a plan and you execute that setup very deliberately. So kind of think about that mindset as you're practicing your setups. And again, it's something practice every single day, because that is the thing that will get you in showmanship so often. And it does require a lot of connection and a lot of practice, to consistently have good setups, but it does make a giant difference in your scores. So we can move on, Maddie. So we're going to talk about the maneuvers that we can do in the class. Obviously, leading the horse at the walk and the trot. They can also ask for an extended walk or an extended trot. Usually you're going to see that, a little bit higher level. But it's a good thing to practice, because your horse should be connected to you and following you. If you're going at a fast walk, a slow walk, a fast trot, a slow jog, you should practice doing some speed changes. Because as you plan out your pattern, when you're getting ready to show, you want to have a plan for how fast you want to go, and you want to know that your horse is going to be there for you. Stopping. Stopping is huge because every time you stop, you're usually setting yourself up for another maneuver. And so if you practice stopping square and stopping straight and having that horse stop with you, your next maneuver is always going to be better. So, stops are a big thing. As you're working with greener horses, like teach them to stop on the wall so that they learn that they have to keep their body in line and learn to stay with you. Just having that straightness and that connection will help you immensely as you go into the other maneuvers. Of course, we have turns. Any combination of degree of turn you can see. Like it says, 90, 180, 270, 360. Any combination. I mean, sometimes it'll say approximately 1 1/3 turn or something like that, depending on the angle. So, you kind of have to be prepared to do any sort of turn. A great practice is to set up at the end of your turn every time, and just get into the habit of your horse staying straight. I think that's kind of been a common theme today when we talk about that, because your horse staying straight is going to greatly affect your score. And if your horse doesn't know how to stay straight through all of these things, it's going to negatively affect your score. So straightness is something you have to practice and strive for every time you're working on it. Backing in a straight or curved line. Again, getting that horse to be connected and moving out of your space really fluidly is a huge, that's a huge part of the class. And both of you staying in the correct position it's a really high degree of difficulty. So if you're able to accomplish that, it's going to show in your score. Backing in curved lines, really difficult, high degree of difficulty if you can do that well. I just want to make a note, when you do have to back a corner or a U or whatever, as your horse backs, they should never cross their front feet in front of each other, because so like your pivots is a forward maneuver, so they're crossing, their left foot over their right foot. If you're backing and you have to do a corner, you want to make sure they maintain a backwards rhythm, or it's a backwards movement. So as they cross, if you're moving them away from you, they're going to step back with the right foot and behind it with their left foot. As you start working into backing curves, backing corners, backing U's, whatever you might see, just make sure that it is always a backwards moving maneuver. Therefore, your front feet are going to step behind. And you never want your front feet to step in front when you're doing any sort of maneuver at the back. Same way as anytime you're pivoting in a forward motion, you always want to step ahead. So that is something, they don't really talk about that in the rule book, but it is, it does make a huge difference, and it is something worth talking about. Let's see, the judge must have each exhibitor set the horse up squarely for inspection during the class. Yes, they will always have an inspection in every pattern. And as you saw in a couple of those patterns that we reviewed, sometimes they can add a setup in a different part of the pattern, just because it is such an important maneuver, obviously, because it's showmanship at halter, and it is ideally, like talking about presenting a halter horse, the setup is the most important thing. So that's why I even said, your setup at the cone when you're ready to begin your pattern is extremely important, and you should take your time and be ready and be super square and straight so that their first impression is, a positive one. And then I don't think there's any slides about the quarter system. We might address that in Q&A if anybody has any questions about that. But as it can relate to a penalty, I think it's important that that's something that you practice and you are deliberate with your steps as you cross over. I kind of like to see someone end up on the same position on each side of their horse. So, you want to have your steps so that you don't have to think about that it becomes muscle memory. So as you cross over, you're getting to the same position on each side of your horse. You're not fumbling with your feet. You know where your feet are going to go. It becomes like a dance move, and it looks that smooth. And again, if anybody has any questions about that, we can talk about that in Q&A as well. And all right. So one thing I always tell my exhibitors, kind of as a parting thought, stay in the moment. Like anytime you're executing a pattern, whether it be showmanship, horsemanship, equitation, or if you're in trail or, really anything, you really, it's easy to like think about maybe what happened 2 maneuvers back, but really what's most important is to stay in the moment and keep moving forward. That's something I tell my riders all the time, stay in the moment and stay with your horse. And just, perform one thing at a time according to the plan. And, that's really the best way to, just have a successful pattern and enjoy your horse. So I think, Maddie, is that all we've got?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you
I got
so
close
much.
to an hour.
Yeah, that was amazing. That's great. And I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions. I know I have a couple. So thank you so much for that. Before we segue into the Q&A portion, just wanted to draw upon a couple of things. What we've just learned from Shannon is actually going to be really helpful in our upcoming e-show. You'll be able to put some of these tips to the test in some of the classes. So those submissions are due June 1st. We'll be feeding out some more details on how to do that, but typically they're just emailed in. So watch for Facebook, Instagram posts for a few more details on that. Don't forget to become a member if you are not already, so that you can participate in future events that we start to put on as we develop. So that being said, as we move into the Q&A portion, if you are a member of Stock Horse Ireland, feel free to just come off of mute, chime right in with any of your questions. If you feel more comfortable typing your question in the box for some reason, that's totally fine. We'll read that out loud. So yeah, all of those Stock Horse Ireland members, if you want to come off and start asking your questions, we'll jump straight into that. Who's going to be the brave first one?
Hi, Derek.
Yeah, we sorted out the mute.
There you go.
Okay, how are you? Thank you, Shannon. That was wonderful.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, showmanship is one of my favorite disciplines. I work with students from abroad, and they've never seen this type of thing. But it's also, it really is also important for fundamentals.
I agree.
So, just on the quartering, you mentioned that, and that is a sticky point. Going from left to right, which foot would you lead with?
So the way that it kind of depends on the person and the horse and their sizes a little bit. In general, I step out, across, and then close. So it's a 4-step maneuver. So I'm always going to step with my inside foot instead of starting with a cross step.
Okay.
I just find that helps. It's less likelihood of losing your balance, right? Like if you try to step across first, there's more like you get a little bit more off balance. Where if you step out first and then across, it just flows a little bit nicer. But again, you have to make that determination based on the pairing of horse and exhibitor. But in general, I feel like that works out the best.
Okay. And the importance of walking heel to toe, that is important, is it, to the judge?
It is. That is something to strive for. Some exhibitors aren't capable of that. And, but it does present, a better picture. So yes, you want to like step to your heel and then, roll off of that. But you also have to find a gait that looks the smoothest and the most natural with your horse. So, that's the cool thing about showmanship is you can interpret a little bit based on your ability and how you interact with your horse, what will look the best as the overall picture. I think if heel to toe looks really artificial and uncomfortable and they can't maintain a rhythm that way, that you might have to, negotiate a little bit on that. But that's where your high degree of difficulty comes in. If someone can be smooth and natural and connected to their horse and maintain that heel to toe step, that's a higher degree of difficulty. So
that's great. Thank you. That's perfect. Thank you.
Hi. Sorsha?
Hi.
Hey.
So I have a question about what would you do to cue your horse for the setup?
Oh gosh, it's a process. I like to have a little bit different, I like to differentiate the back foot cue from the front foot cue. So I use a little downward pressure for them to move their back feet, because by putting downward pressure on the chain, it kind of sets their front feet in the ground. So they're not going to move their front feet around, and then get them to start to move their back feet off of a little bit of downward pressure. And then I use a little upward pressure to just shift the weight slightly off of their front end, and then, side to side based on, to shift their balance to move the left or right foot. Again, it's a long process. You have to get all the feet moving before you can start to refine it like that. But first off, just moving them front and back and just, get their feet a little bit lightened up where they're moving feet and staying straight through their spine and their neck. And then start to refine, okay, I only want this back foot. I only want this front foot. And it's really a matter of changing their balance slightly to help them move the correct foot. Does that answer it?
Yeah, it does. Thanks.
Okay.
And do you have any advice on how, in the back, to keep your horse out of your space?
Yeah, that is a hard one. I like to I think I touched on working on stops, putting them on the wall. And sometimes when you're schooling, you can take your, put your left hand on the shank. So it kind of it gives you a little bit more control. And if your horse is on the wall, then you can get them moving out of your space. It's really about the connection. I mean, you're going to have to shank them, you've got to get them off the shank, but they need to follow your body. So, sometimes putting them on the wall and you can kind of, get bigger than them and get them away from you. It's just a process of learning, and the lighter they are in their face and the lighter they are, like I talked about moving into the setup, they're going to respect your space more and get out of it for the backing. You can also walk forward, stop, and kind of move your shoulders back and take a step or two back. So they start to just really watch your body and move forward and back off of your body. There's several ways, and it depends on the horse. And some horses are just really lazy about it, but it's the more light you can get them on their feet and the more they understand to move, and give you your space, the better off you will be. I mean, you don't want to get heavy on the chain. You want them moving off of your body and not, you're never going to move that horse off that chain if they don't want to get off of it. They have to learn to move away from your body. Because there's nothing uglier in showmanship than somebody dragging their horse back. So, it's definitely lightening up those feet and, facilitating that respect of your personal space. So it's, you teach it going forward and back. So.
Okay, perfect. Thank
that
you.
helps.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's all the questions I have.
Thanks.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Hey Shannon.
Hi.
So my horse, I trotted up to the judge, stopped, turned around to set him up for inspection, and my horse is trained to, my horse is, sorry, I'm in the office today. My horse is trained to not move his pivot leg.
Right.
And so when he stopped, his left leg was back.
Okay.
So in order to set, I move his back legs first in my setup always. And so I pulled that left back leg forward, but then his front legs came forward, and then I ended up getting a stretched out look to try to do as few maneuvers as possible.
Right.
And I just wondered, should I have just left that, or I don't know, what do you do? I didn't know what to do with that back leg.
Well, yeah, no, you
so
you
far.
did the right thing by moving the back leg forward. I would say to prevent that in the future, actually the exercise of just doing like a 90 into a setup is really, really valuable. Like doing 20 of them, you know, because they just learn to, because like what it sounds like is when you finish your turn, he wasn't very well balanced. And so as you moved a foot, he kind of became, you know, he wasn't standing underneath himself. So like doing that exercise of 90 into a setup, it really like, it improves your turn and it improves your setup because they're just like getting that habit of, you know, stand up and pivot and then square up, stand up and pivot and then square up. You know, so it's a harder maneuver when we see that in patterns. And I would say, you know, also make sure when you're setting up, when you ask for his back feet, that you're not allowing his front feet to move so that you can still control those front feet.
That part.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
thank you.
Yeah, just a little bit of schooling, but.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, of course.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
How do you teach or help a horse that struggles to pivot on the inside? That kind.
Well, if they're struggling with that, I think you slow it down as long as they already know to stay straight and kind of step out of your space. But if they're not holding that right foot, really slow it down and think about what the left foot is doing, right? So a lot of times where we step out of a pivot is we aren't like every time you know, like step and across, they should be stepping also with their left hind and balancing. So that's what holds them in a really nice pivot is that is actually stepping and balancing off of the left hind so that the right hind can stay in place. So I think if a lot of times what happens is they take too many steps with their front feet and not a step and balance with their left hind. And then they can't balance their back end and they have to move their right hind. So I think I would slow it down a little bit. Again, like the exercise I said, where to do a 90 and set up, because you're kind of, you're getting that like lift and pivot and then like set that left hind and make that left hind balance. And so, you know, just make sure that you're super, super straight also. And if they start to back off of the right hind and not pivot, pull them forward because you're kind of probably losing your straightness and your forward motion of your turn. So that would be the two things that I would look at is, you know, make sure that horse is stepping and balancing off the left hind. I think we forget about the left hind in the pivot a lot, and it is super important because that's what allows them to stay on the pivot foot. And then, you know, just also the straightness of the body and the forward motion. Does that kind of address what you've got or?
Yeah, no, for sure. That's helpful. I just have another question kind of off the back of that. I'm not well rehearsed in the showmanship. I've hardly at all dabbled in it. Do you get horses that get show sour or ring sour?
Of course,
and if so, yeah, how do you mitigate that?
You know, there is honestly some horses that, just like any other event, there's some horses that love showmanship and they think it's super fun and challenging and they're like always up for it. And there's horses that hate it. And, you know, it's really hard when you have one that is show sour because there's not a lot of opportunity to school without really being obnoxious, you know, like it's kind of schooling and showmanship is a little bit disrespectful, I think, you know, so, you know, yes, there is opportunities for it, but like the things you have to do to actually school your showmanship horse are kind of disrespectful. So, it's just tough. It's just tough. You know, more practice at home, maybe prep them a little different at the show, you know, depending on what the behavior is. But there are some horses that will pin their ears and try to bite you the whole time. And it is really, really hard to fix. You know, so I think there is a point where you say some horses just aren't meant to be showmanship horses. I mean, just like any other event, like some horses that they just don't. And really, when you think about it, if you have a really intelligent horse, it's a silly class, right? You almost like having a little bit dumber horse for showmanship because they don't get so bored with it, like, I don't know. I find that the really intelligent horses learn it really quickly and can get really good at it, but then they also get a little bored with it. I don't know. Like, that's a hard one to answer, but I just change up the way you prepare them. Maybe lunge them down a little more than most people don't think about having to have a horse tired for showmanship. Some horses need to be tired for showmanship. Some horses need to be really fresh for showmanship. So change up the way you prepare them and see if it makes a difference. Add earplugs, take earplugs away. I mean, you guys can still use earplugs, right? I don't know if you can, but, just change up the way you prepare them and change up the system and see if you get any progress with that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Shannon.
Mhm.
Hi, I thought of another question.
Okay, awesome.
I'm quite inexperienced in the showmanship. I've only showed it once, and my horse is super confident at it. So she was just saving my butt the whole time. But
that's nice.
You're talking about penalties in whenever you set up and acknowledge the judge, and then the horse moves, and you go back to the setup. I'm just wondering, like, if I was showing and my horse did that, but she only moved like a little bit, do I still just take it and quarter, or should I go back and fix it?
If it's a small move, like where they step and then step back down and it doesn't like get her out of position in her setup, then yes, you just continue to quarter. If they become out of position, you should fix it. And then, and then continue on with your quartering. Most of these horses, like you said, yours is very proficient. So you're not getting these huge steps generally. So, you can usually move forward, but if they take a big step out, yes, you must fix it, or it'll come off your score even more. So
okay, thank you.
Yep.
I have one more. Oh, sorry, you go. You get.
We have the opposite problem to Neve. We have a very young and inexperienced horse. And like that, showmanship is new to us as well.
Right.
Like a lot of people here in Ireland, we just don't have that experience, though we are trying to get there.
Yep.
So for us, getting him set up in the first instance is a little bit of work, if at all possible. Sure. So how much time or how many maneuvers can you do that without incurring a penalty? In the, the original setup and that.
It doesn't necessarily, it's not a penalty for a slow setup. Okay. As long as you end up with a correct setup. As long as you don't incur any other position penalties in getting it, as far as, too much encouragement, touching your horse, anything like that. It's more of a penalty to not be set up, right? Like to just be like, forget it, I'm going to take this, you know what I mean? And not be set up than to take too long. So it's not a penalty to take too long. It may come out of your maneuver score. If your horse is obviously green and obviously, it takes a lot of maneuvers to get it. But in the end, what you want to get to a correct setup is the main goal. And if it takes longer, it takes longer, but that's the way your horse is going to learn as well. So, and then just keep practicing at home all the time, all the practice. And then it will get easier, like sometimes it takes a while, but it will get easier. So
thanks, Shannon.
Yes, of course.
I have one.
My question. Oh, sorry. Sorry, Natasha. You go ahead.
Okay. Any recommendations, Shannon, for so I know that the horse is supposed to look like they're having fun. Like ears forward would be nice.
Yes.
Mine in the trots tends to have his ears pretty flat back. Not that he's mad, but I think that's just his his face, so to speak.
His RBF.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the trots in particular. And any advice on, is there any way to fix that? Probably treats is not a good idea.
That's not a good idea. That's not a good idea. You know, that's tough because that is tough. It's tough. I don't think, I mean, yes, it takes away from the overall look. You know, you can try with and without earplugs to see if that makes a difference. Sometimes that does. If he'll, you know, like sometimes if you take the earplugs out, they'll be a little better with their ears if you can trust them without the earplugs. You know, that's a tough one. And as long as like in your maneuvers, he's not, you know, growling at you and trying to bite you, it's not a penalty. I mean, obviously it takes away from your overall picture, but if your maneuvers are correct and you're making up ground in your other stuff, like I wouldn't worry about it too much. You know, about half the horses learn to do that, you know, like, and you can't blame them, right? Like,
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there are some, you know, there's some theories about it, but really, yeah, you don't want treats, obviously. And
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing you can try, like fitting your halter a little bit differently or with or without earplugs, just to take away a little bit of physical, you know, just change it up physically. But you're probably never going to get him, you know, to trot around with his ears straight forward, unfortunately.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I know that you said that it's judged on the exhibitor, not the horse. So do you find that there's a lot of these horses in showmanship are super versatile? And if so, what events are they crossing over well in, and what events are they not crossing over as well in?
Again, it's going to depend on the individual. You know, most horses that excel in your horsemanship and your equitation, they already are handy with these maneuvers, right? And so that does make it easier to cross over. You know, because they already know the correct form to turn in. They already know how to stop hard. You know, so whatever. I mean, it's usually easier to teach a little bit more Westerny horse the showmanship. But I've shown a lot of English horses that were really, really good at it. And I've shown a lot of English horses that were really, really difficult and hard and big and, you know, dull. So, you know, it depends on the individual, but if they're already doing trail or horsemanship or any of that, like they're already handy and they already know where their feet are and they already know how to stop square, you know, so that does make it quite a bit easier, I would say. But, you know, the reason that I like showmanship so much when I was a kid is because I was a horse trainer's kid. So I got all the horses that nobody else wanted or we couldn't sell or nobody else wanted to ride. So that's why showmanship became so like such a favorite of mine, because I was like, well, I can make almost any horse be good at showmanship if I just take enough time. And, you know, whether I have the crappiest horse this year or a really nice horse this year, I could make him be good at showmanship. And it, you know, it just came down to taking the time and the practice and connecting with your horse. And, you know, like I said, there are some horses that never are going to be good at showmanship, but pretty much you can make, you know, if you are willing to put the time in, this is a class that anybody can be good at. So that's why I think it's really cool, because you don't have to have the most expensive, fanciest horse. So.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Shannon.
Of course.
Okay, I've thought of another question.
Good.
Some of my horses, this I think probably is a me problem, but whenever I'm trotting specifically, my horses curl their necks in towards me a little bit.
Okay.
And then I'm not sure how to fix that. Maybe it's just like I'm focusing so much on keeping my hands straight that I'm pulling them in towards me.
Yeah, probably.
then yeah. But I also feel like then if I give them more, I feel like they're pulling me.
Yeah. Okay, so this is something, like I said, use that wall to your advantage where you can kind of hold them straight and find where that straight position is. Also do a lot of circles to the right. Don't always pull them to the left. Don't always pull them to the left. You know, circle to the right and then stop so that you find that position and they find that straighter necked position. I think it's a little easier to turn to the left. So a lot of us go left, go left, go left. And then all of a sudden your horse is curved to the left and you don't, and when you stop, then their hip goes flying out to the side. So make sure that you're doing enough walking and trotting, turning to the right as well. And just to line yourself and the horse up in a little bit straighter way, and use that wall. And that isn't just help the horse, that helps you. Like, where is straight? And then you can stop them and exactly like where straight is, because they can't bow out, and you kind of like straighten them into the stop. And that'll just help you like you said, it might be a me problem. But that is a very common problem, and you'll see it a lot where the horses start to just wrap around. So, do more circles and squares to the right, put yourself on the wall, find that straight. And then if you come up to a stop and that horse bows away from you, get them back and to the right. And, and pretty soon they'll start to learn to stay lined out. But just do that work, find the straight and go to the right more.
Okay, perfect. Yeah.
Of course. Derek's on again.
Yeah, just on the showmanship, just for people starting off showmanship, this is all new to them and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And I've run shows here as well a few times, and I've noticed that people go straight in with a lovely halter and again putting a chain and lead on, but the horse isn't familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
You're getting jerking reaction and everything else. And I think you mentioned that the chain is optional, is
Mm-hmm.
it?
It is. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So would you recommend that people bring the horse up to a level of the chain, or if your horse is not used to the chain, don't use a chain?
I mean, if you can correctly do your maneuvers without a chain, then that's perfectly fine. Like, I feel like, your horse is going to get a lot more dull. If you go through the process correctly to get them used to the chain and get them light off the chain the way they should be. But, some horses are more sensitive, and they do, like, you can cover your chain. Like, they make leather covered chains to like soften it up. And then a lot of, when we start our horses, we don't start them with a chain immediately. We use like more of a rope halter. So that it doesn't have the pinching. It's a little bit more of a consistent pressure, but they have to learn to give from that pressure off their pole, off their nose, off their chin, to be able to correctly do the maneuvers. So I would say if you have a horse that can correctly do the maneuvers and just doesn't like the chain, then that's cool. But the chain is there so that they learn to give to that pressure so that they can stay with you and do the maneuvers correctly. So, that just is a little bit more time and practice. And you have to know what you're doing to get them familiar with the chain too. So, and otherwise it's easy to get them scared of it. And that's, then you're dealing with other problems too. So I see that.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Any final questions before we wrap up?
Okay, I have one more since no one else is asking.
Absolutely.
Whenever I was showing the showmanship in Vegas, I had trouble, like, even whenever I was practicing before, my horse would, like, as I was trotting straight towards the judge, she would, like, know we were stopping. So she would start slowing down way in advance. Mm-hmm. And I found myself trying to pull her forward and, like, kissing her on, just trying
Yeah.
to keep her going. And she just, like, she knew we were stopping. I'm trying to think, like, how I can stop her anticipating that. And the only thing I can think of off the top of my head is, like, practice it in the arena, have someone stand there and, like, trot past them all the time, or, like, have a dressage with my hand, that sort of thing. But is there any other advice you have?
So my favorite exercise for that is, yes, you can either have your practice judge like back up, like as you come at them, and you can go past them. But really my favorite exercise is trotting figure eights at the judge. So like you're going to trot at the judge, turn off to the left, trot at the judge, turn off to the right, like, so that they aren't, it just takes away like, oh, what are we doing? You know, like, oh, we're going this way, instead of just like whipping them past them every time to where they get anxiety about it. So like if you just like, and you can do it at the walk too, walk and trot figure eights at the judge and then turn off at the judge, turn off the other way. And then, so then they start to like, wait, like, oh, wait, what are we going to do this time? Instead of getting anxious and feeling like they're going to get, scolded or, you know, disciplined for slowing down, they are more like, okay, I'm going to stay with her and see what we're going to do next. So that just kind of changes it up, and it helps them stay straight too, because a lot of times they'll pull you one way or another as you approach the judge. So if you kind of change it up and turn left and then turn right, you know, and like I said, you can do it at the walk and the trot. And what that teaches them is just like looking to you instead of looking at the judge, like looking to you like, okay, what are we going to do? Are we going to stop here? Are we going to turn this way? Are we going to turn that way? And so like it stops all that anticipation. That's one of my favorite ones. And it helps a lot. And there was something else I was going to say. And also like, as you approach your judge, when you're trotting to the judge, like don't focus so much on the judge, right? Like focus on planning your stop, right? Like I feel so many people are like trying to get to the judge. You don't have to be that close to the judge. You know what I mean? Like, yes, the horses still do anticipate, but like plan a really good square stop and focus on that instead of like lugging up an extra step. And I think if you start thinking about, I'm going to stop here instead of I have to get my horse to the judge, it just changes the way you think about it a little bit. And that helps too. But the figure eights really are golden as far as helping that problem.
Perfect.
And sometimes you just have to whip them past them, but you know, the figure eights have been a really good tool for me. So
awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
One final question just before sorry, who am I cutting across? Just one final question, just what Niamh was talking about there about, you know, stopping at the judge. Did you say that you have to stop within 10 feet of the judge when you're coming up to square?
Oh yeah. Like really from where the judge is, you want your horse's nose maybe about 4 feet away from the judge.
Okay.
Yeah. And you're better to be a step back than a step too close. And but yeah, I mean definitely you don't want to be any further than 5 or 6 feet. Like that would be too far back.
Too far back.
Sure.
Yeah. Super. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I have a question. So if you're like on a stop and like your pattern says like you enter in and like you stop and then you like go straight to a trot, how would you like work with your horse to like get your horse to like trot off like right away?
Okay, that's a good question. You know, like I said, it's all practice and showmanship. So you just want them following your shoulder. So even at the walk, you can practice walking faster, walking slower so that they're kind of paying attention. And then, you know, I like to give a little verbal cue, a little cluck or a kiss. I mean, you can decide what that system needs to be for you. And then, you know, they'll start to follow you. You just have to practice a lot. Like you want to make yourself get up tall and bigger, give them a little thing. And then if you've taught them to follow you, they're going to go faster when you go faster. So, you know, just the more you can practice, the better that will get. But just, you know, teach them, think about instead of you trying to make it happen with the chain, teach your horse to follow you so that when you go, they go. And when you stop, they stop. Because you're never going to make them go faster just with your arm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, keep practicing.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, those were great questions. Thank you so much again, Shannon, for all of that. That's going to be helpful for everybody as they work on their horses at home, e-shows, clinics, wherever they attend. And this will be going on YouTube. So if anyone wants to watch it back, that'll be up shortly. We'll make a little announcement on social media when we have some of the webinars up. So we'll be able to look back at some of the help that Shannon shared with us. But thank you again so much for that. And thank you everybody who joined.
It was super fun. Thanks, everybody. Good luck.